You want to start when I went in the Navy?
Yeah, you were telling me last time we started speaking of this subject that you had grown up over in Arkansas and then you left for the Navy for a couple of years, and you were saying that while you were in the Navy, you began reading different books.
Yeah, I grew up on a farm and we raised cotton and soybeans mostly. We had 40 acres rented over in Arkansas. We grew 15 acres of cotton and some soybeans, and that was during the war years, World War II. And both brothers were drafted into the service, and one of them was a conscientious rejecter.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
And so they...
Which brother was that?
That's the oldest one's in California now.
He was a conscientious objector? On what basis?
Back then. I think he had joined the Church of God.
Wow.
Or Church of Christ, Church of God, I think it was.
Wow.
Sort of with fundamental
Pentecostal type
things, yeah. And I think it was on religious reasons, probably.
Wow.
And of course, back that far back, that he stood out like a sore thumb.
I guess he did.
And so they didn't put him in combat. Now he had to do the what do they call him, corpsman. But I don't remember. So
they gave him some kind of non-combatant status.
Yeah.
He didn't have to carry a gun.
I don't think so. I don't know for sure where he went overseas or not.
Huh.
Now the other brother, he went overseas. He came in that Normandy landing just a few days after they started that.
What were your brothers' names?
Jack King. It's the one who lives over Arkansas now. He's
right.
And the oldest one is in California.
What was his name?
Eugene King.
Uh-huh.
I had there's two brothers and two sisters, but the one sister died when she was 10 years old from ruptured appendicitis. So I never did see her.
Where do you place in terms of the birth order? Youngest, middle, old, we're not oldest, obviously.
The one that died at 10, her name was Mildred. She's the oldest, and then Eugene, and then Virginia and Jack, and then me.
So you're the youngest of...
Yeah.
Four
or five.
Five, would have been five. Yeah, well, yeah, five was
five. Okay, we'll start. I grew up on the farm. My mom and daddy, neither one finished high school. And I guess Mama got married probably when she was 16 years old, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
it's pretty common at that time, I guess.
Yeah, it was common. Yeah. And we had... we didn't have a town. We lived out in the pure country on a dirt road over in Arkansas. It wasn't gravel. No utilities in front of the house. So we had a little pump. She hand pumped it. Mm-hmm. You had to pour a little water on top of it to prime it to get it going. And that pump was real close to the house near the barn too. We pumped water into what we call the horse trough to give them water. And we had chickens running on the ground. I had to feed the chickens. But anyway, we moved to Missouri for a year, and Dad had rented land up there, and it flooded out, and we gave up the crop. We lost the crop, and Mom and Daddy separated at that time, and later on divorced. But I stayed with my sister Virginia.
What year would that have been approximately?
About 1949. So I stayed with my sister Virginia and finished 11th grade. And I took typing. Now I barely passed typing. But at least I went through the rudiments and learned to type in 11th grade, so that was as far as I went in school. I came down to Memphis. Mama had moved to Blythe, Arkansas. At that time, we lost that crop up around Reeves, Missouri, Risco, Missouri, and that was really when I started dating. More or less.
The crop that you lost, was it cotton or?
Cotton. The water stood up
right.
Foot in the field. Well, that farm had a reputation of being flooded, so that year it flooded. So anyway, we lost the crop and the tractor and stuff. So Mama and Daddy separated, and Mama moved to Blytheville. And I think she moved in a lady's house to do her clean, older lady, to do her housework and cooking for her room and board. And at that time, I think she worked at I guess it was J.C. Penney's. That was when they had those little air tubes that shot around from department to department. I forget what they call them.
Pneumatic tubes?
Yeah, yeah. But
Penny's, the department,
yeah,
the catalog store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're in Blytheville for a while. And that year, the first year after we moved out of Missouri, Risco, I stayed with my sister and brother-in-law and finished the 11th grade.
Where were you born? I'm just backtracking.
I was born outside of Collierville out here, just across the state line to Missouri, Casey, Mississippi, just a few miles from what do you call it? What I just said, it starts with C.
Collierville?
Collierville.
So you're born in Tennessee or in Mississippi?
No, Mississippi. Casey,
Yeah, I
Mississippi.
didn't know. Huh.
And then we moved.
What year?
1930.
Okay.
Then we moved to Shelby County.
Right.
And we lived there until I was 9 years old, and Daddy rented some land over in Arkansas. The man that my sister married, her daddy moved over there, and I think sort of talked Daddy into moving over there. So anyway, Daddy moved over there, and I think Virginia, my sister, married Miss Brody G about a year later. But anyway, I finished the 11th grade, and then I came to Memphis, and I got room and board. And I knew the Army was going to draft me. So I joined the Navy. I thought the test would be too hard to join the Air Force. So I took the Navy test, and I went in the Navy and rode a train from Memphis to Little Rock, and they put us up in a boarding house overnight.
What year was this that you joined the
1950.
Navy? 1950.
December 1950.
Why would they be drafted in 1950? Wasn't World War II
Korean War.
Up by the Korean War was already sort of...
Oh, it was going on. It was still going on.
All right.
And so they gave me an examination and sent me to boot camp at San Diego on a train. Rode across the country on a train. The first time I ever saw a desert or anything in 1950, December 1950. Went to boot camp. And I think, I can't remember names so well now, but I can still remember the drill sergeant was Ladd. The guy's name Ladd. But anyway, from boot camp we went to, see, at this time I didn't even dream or think about anything beyond the five senses. You know, I was just oblivious to all that. And really I was about 20. So I failed 2 grades in school, so I was 2 years behind. So I was about 20 years old at that time. I was 19. Anyway, went through boot camp in San Diego, and then out of there on the ship to...
Which ship? Do you remember the name? Destroyer?
No, it was a troop ship.
Oh, right, that kind of ship. Okay.
Yeah, we got on that, and my destination was Guam. For further transfer, I think that was the orders. We went up under the Golden Gate Bridge, and I had one of those little $1.40 little box cameras. Took little teeny pictures. In fact, maybe still some here. I took a shot of the Golden Gate Bridge, you know, shot up at an angle up there, as we was going under it. And we stopped over in Hawaii. And they let us go ashore for a few hours into Honolulu. We stopped. I guess for all I know, we might have gone into Pearl Harbor. I don't know now, but we did stop over there overnight. And from there, we went to Guam. Stayed on Guam 3 months, and they had us tearing down Quonset huts while I was waiting to be further assigned. I got to go. I met some guy there that was civilian. That his daddy owned or managed or something the bottle. Wasn't Coca-Cola, but it was Royal Crown something bottling company. And see, we were young. I was just 20, and he did a little bit of scuba diving, or at least a little bit of a mask and stuff on, so you get underwater. And I went with them a few times, and I see the car, go up under the water a little bit and see the pretty fish and all that mess while I was there. And also, let's see, seemed like I went on the beach there too. But I had pictures somewhere here of the Quonset huts, and you know what Quonset huts are.
Yeah.
And then I got my orders from Guam to Okinawa to join this the squadron, patrol squadron. P2Vs, what they call them. 2-engine patrol bombers. They had a bunch of radar gear on them, patrol bombers. And they flew me from Okinawa to Guam, no, from Guam to Okinawa. On one of those, I think it's like a C-46. And they gave us bags, like grocery bags, to upchuck in if you got sick. Well, I didn't get sick, but I remember when we got to Guam, got to Okinawa. We flew from Guam to Okinawa. When we got there, the plane sort of circled around, and back in those days, they were publishing the Life magazine in full color. That was one of the real popular magazines, Life magazine. And those huts had grass thatched roofs. I looked down that, and it was just like looking at a picture out of Time magazine. I was just in awe to see those little thatched roof things down there. We landed, and our quarters were Quonset huts. But I was permanent. I mean, that was my permanent assignment to that patrol squadron. And I told them I wanted to. No, wait a minute. Okay, at that time I told them I wanted to be a mechanic, aircraft mechanic. So about the last 2 weeks we was there, they actually assigned me to the shop. I forget what they called it. They didn't call it a mechanic shop. They called it a machine shop or something like that, but it was to work on those engines. And I remember about the first thing they did, they sent me out to, you took a little bolt out, put your finger down in there or something, and pulled out a little filter to see if it was any iron filings in it, Well, Lord, I had trouble getting up in there in that cow. I wasn't heavy at that time, heavy weight, but it was just awkward getting up in that cow and up over that wheel and getting me that thing out. But they never did start me out doing mechanic work until the squadron finished its tour of duty. But now we were there a while before I was assigned to the mechanic shop. But I got to go. I took a lot of pictures on Okinawa, and they had the dried snakes in the market. And I took pictures of all that, and they had they buried their ancestors in down in things like would be a well, like a dug well, except there wasn't water in it, and you could slide back a concrete thing, a lid about that thick. And look down, and I actually did. I guess it was a no-no, but I did it. And see, back at that time, the war had only been over. This was 51. The war had been over in 45. So they were conquered people, so they didn't say anything to the GIs. But that was a graveyard. And I took a bunch of pictures then, and I remember they grew sweet potatoes. And so when we transferred from there, we flew in those planes. Well, we flew in. Since I was in an air squadron, well, we didn't have to go back by ship. We flew back. I think it was, best I remember. It flew us back to Woodby Island. They're about 90 miles, as I recall, from Seattle, Washington. So you ever heard of Woodby Island?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's where we were assigned.
Once, when you were in the Navy, you were working in the personnel department or something.
Well, when we flew back to Woodby Island. We no more than got on the ground good. And see, I was still with Claude B. Alford,
Right.
my old beer drinking, carousing buddy.
Right.
From boot camp days. And my nickname then was Jim. And I dropped that when I got out of the Navy. Nobody knew it at work or anything. But my brother started calling me that. And so I kept it going, I guess, in the Navy. So old Claude B. Alford said, Jim, he talked with that Texas bro. Jim said, you're going to freeze your butt off out there on that ramp working on those planes this winter. He said, I looked at your, what do? You take a aptitude test and mess.
Right.
And I had made high in clerical.
Right.
And so he said, why don't you check with the personnel officer and see if you can't get transferred in the personnel department. So I thought that over. And see, even before I went in the Navy, I thought, well, when I grow up, I want to be a mechanic. I want to be a mechanic or something. That's all I could think about. But for some reason, I checked with the personnel officer, and he transferred me to personnel. Well, the first few days, they had me filing, and I couldn't type worth a hoot. Never did, really. But, you filled out forms. If we'd have had word processors, I'd have been in business.
Right.
For the word spell checker and
right.
and all that mess, but they didn't. They had carbon paper and all that mess at that time.
Right.
And they had stencil machines where you get your hands all messy if you
When
make
I was
copies.
in the Navy, we're still using exactly the same things. Yeah, if you made a copy on those stencils, you had to go back with fluid and repair them, multiple copies. It was a mess.
Well, anyway, that's how I got in the personnel office from being a mechanic. And so I really never did be mechanic. I didn't turn a boat, really, a screw, really.
So and kind of a few turns of fate basically got you on the
if it hadn't been for
clerical and then ultimately.
If it hadn't been for old Alfred, my beer drinking buddy,
right,
I'd have been a mechanic.
Right.
But that changed it from me from a mechanical worker to a darn head worker, I guess, for accounting stuff.
Right.
And so I worked in the personnel office the whole time I was in the Navy, except the first few months. And I was in the personnel office several months, and they transferred us, from there. Wait a minute, I was in that patrol squadron, they sent us back to Japan. We sent 6 months tour duty in Japan. And I remember renting a Jeep, and I got them to let me fly with them, in the tail section of one of those bombers, one of those patrol bombers. The guy that was my boss in the personnel office, I think, was a pilot. But anyway, I got to go up one time in those planes and see it. But when they transferred us back from, I guess it was Japan.
Mm-hmm.
We went back to Woodby Island. That was our home base, Woodby Island, up near Seattle. And just to be quite frank with you, see, I wasn't an outgoing personality. And there was another, I done made PC personnel in 3rd class. In fact, that's as far as I ever got. Mm-hmm. But they had another guy, they got orders in to transfer one. I guess you call them, what'd you call a personnel? PN?
Personnelman.
Yeah, but you had an initial.
PN3 or
PN3,
something like
yeah.
That, right.
Well, transfer 1 PN3. Somewhere for further assignment. Oh, they told me to go, I think they sent me to Seattle. There, San Diego, not San Diego, but San Francisco, I can't remember where. Must have been Seattle for further assignment. So this personnel officer liked this other guy better than he did me. And so he transferred me, and I ended up on the USS Sproston, a destroyer escort.
What's the name of the ship?
Sproston.
Sproston.
S-P-R-S-T-O-N.
Okay.
The USS Sproston. I don't remember the number of it.
Uh-huh.
But, man, I never forget, when I went on board that ship, you were supposed to salute
Right.
I don't know. He's supposed to salute the
Ask
officer
permission
today.
to come on aboard. Permission
Yeah.
to come aboard, sir.
And I was scared to death, you know. So I got on there and, you know, went to the personnel office. And you know, in those days, personnel had a little prestige because you handled all the records and you wrote up the leaves and you did all this mess. So you were a little bit more than a mechanic. You know, you had a little more pull.
Yeah, some status.
And Lord, I was working with, the second under the command of the captain would come in, you know, and sign papers and stuff. So
an executive officer,
yeah,
like that, right?
Yeah. So, I never forget this. Me an old country boy. Some way I made an impression because I was simple and sincere. And anyway, they wanted to take a picture of all the crew on the ship, and they had us all up forward. And they had a captain, full captain, and a commander. And this commander took a liking to me, and this captain knew it. And Lord, in front of all those darn men and officers, this captain says, King, says, you go find Malloy. Says, you got crazy. You got as much influence on anybody else on the ship, or some silly something like that, you know, some flattering thing.
Yeah. And
I want to crawl in the hole. But I never will forget that. They took a picture of all of us on that ship. But in all that time, you see, I still didn't know. I didn't even think about anything being intangibles and abstracts versus what you perceive with the five senses. But being in the personnel office, and I guess some of those officers talked to me a little bit. One of them, I remember, definitely tried to encourage me to go to college, full-fledged college. So I ended up just going to a business school because I was so scared of my academic abilities were so, I had to work at them so hard. Oh, well, while I was on board that ship, I took a GED test out at sea, and when I got leave, I went back up to Hornsville, Missouri, and I actually got a regular high school diploma. And a few months after that, they quit issuing them. They gave certificates or something. But anyway, I got the high school diploma. But I went on and took some correspondence courses. I remember taking one in accounting. I learned debits and credits and what assets and liabilities and all that. I learned the terminology, if nothing else. Mm-hmm. And I also took a history course. And I don't know what else, but I did take several courses by correspondence. They still letting you do that in using the Navy?
Yeah, they have this thing called a PACE program or something. You can take courses underway.
Well, I took several of those. Mm-hmm. And when I got ready to get out of the Navy, I'd done been doing that clerical work. And I'd done lost interest in mechanics. So, due to my feeling that I couldn't make it in college, I just opted for a 2-year business school. And I didn't have enough sense at that time to realize that, you know, it ain't really so much what you know, it's what school you went to and all that jazz. So I went to Jones Business School for a couple of... Oh, while I was in the Navy, I remember in the port. See, home port was Pearl Harbor in Hawaii for that ship. And I remember going to the library on the shore there on the base and picking up things like Reader's Digest. It had something on psychology in the Reader's Digest and things like that. And at that time, I thought psychology was for crazy people. I mean, that was just my, you know, ignorant, naive view of psychology.
Well, a lot of people think that until they look at it a little more deeply.
So anyway, I read an article or two that sort of softened me up a little bit, I guess. And then when I got out of the Navy, I went straight to, I should have stayed out in California with my old buddy. He got out about the time I did. And he married Mary Lynn, his high school sweetheart, Mary Lynn. And
this is Claude B. Alford. I thought he was from, where was he from?
Well, around Aransas Pass, in that area in there. I know he worked out of Aransas Pass on the shrimp boats in the summertime when he was in high school.
That's in Texas?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Aransas Pass, Texas.
Right. Okay.
Uh,
So after you got out of the Navy, you then went to immediately to Little Rock, the business school?
I went immediately to, Mama was living then in Hot Springs. So I took the train see, I got out of the Navy there in San Francisco, what's that island, Treasure Island?
Yeah, Treasure Island.
I caught a train there all the way, at that time they had trains running everywhere, all the way to Hot Springs, Arkansas.
Wow. Okay.
And see, if I'd been more adventurous, I would have. Well, Alfred was, I think, he got out of the Navy about the same time I did, because 2 months early. And he stayed in California and went to college. And majored in business administration or something other, and got a job as an oil company. He wrote to me for several years after we got out of the Navy, and then finally, I didn't hear nothing else from him.
Right.
And the last time I heard from him, he was in Gaddafi's, what's the country Gaddafi's running in?
Iraq?
No, not Iraq. Not.
Oh, Gaddafi. Yes,
Gaddafi.
Syria. Sorry, I'm getting confused.
No, not Syria.
Lebanon? No, that's not Lebanon. He's
No.
Gaddafi. He's in Syria, isn't he?
No, it's not Syria. But anyway, he was in that country.
Okay.
But he was working for an oil company. I think it was a Gulf
Yeah.
Oil Company. Last time I heard from him, that's the last address I had. And at that time, they had a servant or something. The country.
Libya.
Libya.
Gosh. Okay.
Libya. He was in Libya, and he was talking about a servant and just different things. And last I heard from him. So when I got out of the Navy, like I told you, I went straight back to
Hot Springs.
Hot Springs, and I think one about the first things I did, I had done planned on and written too. I knew enough by that time to write the Chamber of Commerce and stuff. And what I don't understand to this day, I learned some way how to open checking accounts and savings accounts. I guess maybe my brother and sister-in-law, maybe in Bible, told me or taught me that. And one of the first things I did, I had saved up a little money. On that low pay, you didn't save much, but I'd saved a portion of it. And I was having a portion of it taken out automatically out of my Navy pay and being sent back to that bank and deposited in that savings account. I didn't have to touch it. Bank
Good for
draft.
you. I wish I had done that.
Well, anyway, I took a Greyhound bus from Hot Springs to Blythe, Arkansas. My brother that's in California now was living there then.
Uh-huh.
He called around and carried me down to the Chevrolet dealer, and one of the salesman's wife had a 51 Chevrolet, little 4-door sedan, little 6-cylinder straight line engine. I bought that thing for $800, and it seemed to be in real good shape and everything. So I drove it the 2 years I was over in Hot Springs, over in Little Rock, going to business school. So I had transportation then, and I went from Hot Springs to Little Rock and enrolled in Jones Business School, college, they called it, and took accounting. And see, back in those days, they had boarding houses everywhere.
Right.
We're talking about in 1954.
Right.
So I went in the Navy in 1950 and got out in 54.
Right.
Cut that off in a minute. Pause, what are you doing? Okay. We were back, and I think I had just enrolled, and I said I was living in a boarding house within walking distance of Jones Business School in Little Rock. And room and board, the one we stayed in, there was a little house out in back. There was a little 2-story house where they did the cooking and the kitchen for everybody. And there was room for 3 men out in back. And I sort of liked that. That was a little bit more private. And I had my car, my $800 car. And I got the GI Bill of Rights. I was going to school under that. So I had, one of the old boys, odd guy, I can't do all this in sequence, but anyway.
Sure.
This guy was sort of strange. and he told me about some of the occult kind of stuff. Mentioned and I subscribe. I guess that's when I subscribed for some little correspondence course on how to meditate or some kind of thing, prana or something. Prana. It's not that course you saw in the attic.
Right.
The one before that. But anyway, I guess that was the first touch I had of any kind of mysterious stuff from all. But anyway, he was finishing school and he worked for part-time for a wholesale wallpaper and paint store, and he, recommended me to that guy that ran that, and so I got a part-time job, picking up a little bit of money going down there at night, and that's when I learned to do the ad machine that I'm doing now, that I did for 40, it was a
10 keys sort of
10 key thing.
Yeah.
They didn't even have them at school. I took a course in school on a darned old, what do you call them, a comptometer or something. A whole bunch of silly keys and mess that nobody was even using then. They were that far behind in school.
Right.
But on this little part-time job, well, so I was forced to learn to use this machine and not taking a course in it. You're supposed to have a home row of keys on that ad machine, and it's supposed to be the middle row where you move your finger up or you move it down, faster motion.
Right.
Well, I learned by having it on the bottom, so I moved my fingers up 2 places up, and I never did learn the other way. And I could add it faster, and a lot of it worked. But so I learned on my own how to use one of those machines, ad machine, because of that part-time job. So I made a little extra money there, so we got, but I was, had enough for room and board out of the GI Bill. They paid a certain amount of money in the tuition. Well, I spent a little bit more, and then I dipped into my savings for extra stuff, a little bit of extra stuff, but pretty much, so after I got that part-time job, I was pretty much self-sufficient, yeah. But walking from the boarding house to Jones Business School, I passed a new used bookstore. And this man had all this mess in the winters. Emmett Fox, had a bunch of mess about reincarnation and a whole bunch of things. And then there was one book in the window that said, TNT, The Power Within You. Well, that book sort of fascinated me. So I think, instead of buying some of them, I went to the library.
Right.
And started checking out some books. Well, so this is, and then Mr. Kelly at school, I took a math course under him, and I also took salesmanship.
Money and banking, I think.
Money and banking, all those under Mr. Kelly. The guy that really got me thinking deeply. Mr. Kelly would give these definitions, and he'd give and he talked like Willie Nelson, sounded like he talked through his nose. His nose was stopped up something. And the old man was retired from being a high school teacher. And I got to know him well enough, he invited me out to his house one time, and he gave me a little bit of jar of dollar gold plum jelly, and that's why I got that dollar gold crabapple tree out there in the yard today. Is Mr. Kelly had a dollar gold, and I set one out.
What's the word? A doggo?
D-O-L-G-O, dollar gold crabapple.
Right. Okay.
But Liz never did fool with making any jelly. But anyway, that's the why of that tree out there in that yard today. I hadn't thought about that in years, but that's why. And the old man would say, buy land. That's why I got a piece of land today. Never did do nothing with it, but I got it. But he would give a definition of a hat. And he'd say a hat is a head cover. Well, that eliminates a whole bunch of stuff. I forget the exact definition, but the one that really turned me on was, we were taking money in banking. And he pulled a dollar bill out of his pocket. I don't know if I got a dollar bill now, but he said, all right, there's a dollar bill. He said, we're taking money in banking. He says, well, now you see this dollar bill? He said, that's not money. he said that represents money. And he said, then he gave you a definition of an intangible. Oh, let me give you a definition of tangible and an intangible. Okay, he said an intangible was something you couldn't perceive with the five senses. You couldn't see it, smell it, taste it, touch it, or hear it. And you couldn't hit it with a stick. Well, when he said you couldn't hit it with a stick, saw a little light went on in my head.
Kind of like the Buddhist stories, the Zen Buddhist, where somebody comes to enlightenment, Usually they hit them with a stick. It's really interesting.
Well, that little definition of intangible, along with those books I've been reading from that bookstore, like TNT, The Power Within You and all that all happened along in there, and that's when I began to think abstractly and realize, aware of what I was doing for the first time in my life. And I was went in the Navy when I was 20 and come out when I was 24, so I was about 24, 25 years old when I was aware of an abstraction. And I checked out a book in the bookstore long in there. See, I was on in Little Rock for 2 years in the book in
business college. Right.
Well, the lady that checked me out at the library was a Baha'i, unbeknownst to me. Well, I checked out several old books, and one of them was The Little Known Sects, not S-E-X, but S-E-C-T. Yes, or he said, I can't, it seems like,
sects,
it's hard for me to separate pronouncing those two words. It sounds alike to me.
Right.
But anyway, it had the Baha'is in there. It had, I don't know if it had the Self-Realization Fellowship, but it had some of the Eastern religions.
Right.
And so, based on that, she invited me to a Baha'i talk that was being given in one of the hotels there. Well, it sort of started me off on the wrong foot, because really, it wasn't a fireside. It wasn't really a talk on the Baha'i faith. What it was, they had invited this ambassador's wife just to give a talk about India. And I remember she had a little mark up here on her forehead, that little thing they wear, whatever it is. And she talked about India or whatever. And at that time I wondered, now how can that woman know two languages and be thinking in one language, talking to all that business? But they had a little card table set up in the back of the room, or in front of the room as you walked in the door, maybe a couple of card tables. And they had this free literature. Oh, universal this and universal that. Well, I could care less for all that, because I had just begun my search and hadn't named it yet, but where did I come from, why am I here, where am I going, more or less. And none of that stuff, none of those pamphlets, addressed my immediate questions. So I glanced at that, and I don't even know if I picked up any of them or not. But they didn't follow up on me, best I remember, or invite me to any more firesides or anything, or if they did, I didn't go. Well, that was my encounter with the Baha'i faith, period. And then, I don't know how long it was, 6 months or a year for all I know, I moved back to Memphis after being in Little Rock 2 years and finishing. So I come back to Memphis to try to get a job. And I did get a job with Light, Gas, and Water, based on that 2 years of business schooling, because they needed a clerk in property accounting, right where I come out of when I quit 40 years later.
Huh.
Although during that 40 years I went over to internal audit for 15 years and then came back to property accounting.
Can I ask, at what point did you go out to the West Coast with your brother-in-law or something?
That was after I started working at Light, Gas, and Water.
Okay,
I was there about a year or so.
Right. All right, didn't realize that. Huh.
Yeah, see, he was still my brother, not brother-in-law. My brother lived in Blytheville.
Uh-huh.
And when I first got out of the Navy, you know, I went to Mama's there in Little Rock, Hot Springs.
Yeah.
I rode the bus up there and bought me a car.
Right. He's the one who got you set up with a car
Yeah.
and everything. Right.
Yeah. So then, a year or two later, after I got out of business school, he was having back trouble. And I'd only been working, I guess, about a year or so. And I had done already, see, I got interested, I didn't tell you about this, in Little Rock, when I was working at part-time job at that wallpaper wholesaler.
Uh-huh.
It was at night, and I went in the bathroom one night and sat down on a john and looked down there, and there was a little booklet down there. And I don't remember what they called it, but it was one of those little Unity Church of Christianity books, one of those little affirmation things.
Right.
And it made a little bit of sense. So I looked in the phone book or something and contacted the Unity Church of Christianity and started going to some of their Sunday morning meetings.
Okay.
And so I was getting in this religious mood and everything. I didn't want to join no church, but this sounded better than the Baptist and Methodist and those kind of things. And so for a little while there, I entertained the idea of becoming a Unity minister. And I rode up with a minister there up to some town up there close to Kansas City, Missouri, where their headquarters was. And anyway, so when I got to Memphis, I started going to the Unity Church of Christianity here in Memphis, and I met this Jerome Baker was supervisor of the water meter shop, and they had the factory where they made them was in San Diego, I guess, California. So I got the wild idea that I'd sort of like to see if I could get a job in California, move out there. So I got a letter of recommendation from this Jerome Baker. So I guess I'd been here a year or two, or maybe 2 years, I don't know how long, here and working like gas and water. And my brother in Blytheville decided that he just couldn't take that work in Blytheville. Well, I think this part here, of course, this won't ever get back to the family, but he had his in-laws. See, she was the only daughter of about 4 more brothers or something or other. Well, they babied her as the baby sister. And Lord God, either her brothers or his father-in-law, my brothers, you know, father-in-law or some of his brother-in-laws were there every day. He couldn't turn around his own house without some of the in-laws being there.
Right.
And I think this is the biggest reason. He finally confided in me.
Right.
Nodded his head in agreement. I said, I want to know something. I've been suspecting something for years. Was part of the reason you moved to California to get away from your in-laws? It's not it. So anyway, the way he did it, he was a pretty good John Deere mechanic. And he checked around in Fresno, California, and they needed a John Deere mechanic. And he applied for it on a telephone, and he sort of sneakily bought a second car with the excuse that for his son to drive. His son was 16 and just barely driving age. He bought that car. It turned out to be a 51 Chevrolet like I had. And so he just up and went out there, left in the better car.
Yeah.
And a few days later called her from California. Well, honey, I've got this job and I done found this house. Come out here. No way, she was furious. Enraged. And so strange, but I suggested to her, and even back then logically reasoned out. I said, okay, Virginia, you got these 3 kids to raise. I mean, I know he's done a bad, dirty thing, unforgivable, but you might want to try it. And you can always leave if you don't like it. But if you don't ever try it, you'll never know. And the funny thing about it,
Virginia was your sister-in-law or your sister?
yeah, well, I've got a sister and a sister-in-law named
Both
Virginia.
named Virginia. Okay.
Yeah, that's
right. I
confusing.
thought that might be the case. All right.
Yeah, my brother married a Virginia Johnson.
Uh-huh.
That's the one in California.
Right.
So I was talking to Virginia Johnson King.
Right.
And the funny thing about it, her daddy encouraged her the same thing to go out there and try it. So between her daddy encouraging her and me, she decided to try it. And the thing about it, this was another thing too. I wasn't ready to go out there so much for a job. I was ready to go out there and investigate Paramahansa Yogananda's self-realization thing. Because I bought the book.
Autobiography of a Yogi?
Yeah. And
Right.
then took that correspondence course, some of it. That thing's
Right.
still up there in the attic. I was going to show you before I chucked it. Still got that thing after 40 years.
Don't throw it away. If you
I'm going to give it to you,
I'd like to
or
have
you'll
it.
see it.
No, it'd be very meaningful.
Or you can throw it in your box of books then.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we drive out there in this car he bought for his son. We loaded up, we had a truck to load up the furniture and haul it to California, to Fresno, California. And we took this car. Well, I think the only trouble we had with that car going to California, I think we had a flat tire, we had a spare or something, we had to buy a new tire on the way. But the darn thing started to kick it wouldn't stay in gear. It started kicking out of gear. And somebody had to sit up there and just sort of keep the hand on the darn gear shift to keep it from jumping out of gear.
Wow.
Well, now I would improvise.
Go across on Route 66?
I guess, I don't know.
That was a famous old road, that went across.
We're talking about back in 1957.
Yeah, okay.
So,
well, it's probably a two-lane highway.
It was.
Yeah, right. It's probably Route 66.
Before the interstates ever thought of it.
Right, that was on the rise now. Yeah.
Well, here I was, and my sister-in-law, I guess, up in the front seat, and the three kids were in the back. And the oldest one was old enough to drive, barely, 16. So we rotated driving some, and we stopped somewhere, I don't know where, maybe it was Texarkana somewhere, and got a motel for the night. And then got up the next morning and drove, and we got in, I don't know exactly how we did it now, but we got into Needles.
Yeah, going over the pass there, up in a high mountain pass.
We got into Needles about noon, high noon we got there.
Right.
Well, we wasn't going to cross that desert, so we rented a motel. I guess we paid full fare, and we just went in there and just flopped across the beds. And about the time the sun went down, we went and got in the car and drove we drove all night through the desert out from there to California, and got into Fresno, I think about 9 o'clock the next morning. We got there, the sun was shining pretty and everything, And we found the house. And as you would imagine, that was quite a cool reception.
Wow, really?
Cool reception between...
On which side?
Well, Virginia's side.
Right.
Eugene had done the bad thing,
Right.
my brother. And so that was a cool reception. So I stayed there, I don't know, a couple of nights. So I've been in their house, they're still living in it.
Wow.
And I've only been out there that one time. I haven't been back since then. But, I stayed there a couple of nights and went on back into, this was Fresno, went back to San Diego, and found this. I was used to buses, and I could get around
Were
like
you
it was
still driving your brother's second car? Is that how you got that?
No. I mean that was